variation in support here amongst the Malaysian fans. You've seen so many are out in their thousands here on Friday afternoon.
It's usually here where we see that pocket of the Tony Arbolino fan club that resonates or resides in this part of the world, make their voices heard. Arbolino was up in 7th this morning, just behind that man, Celestino Vietti. 6th quickest, last year's winner on a 2:04.6. Very, very early days, and of course the picture may change as we go through the weekend, but the Boscoscuro is much more competitive versus the Calix than they were really next stage until the final weekend. And including Philip Selat, who was 12th quickest, put in a grand total of 15 laps this morning, which was in line with what most riders did earlier on today. Clearly no initial signs of the shoulder injury which forced him to cut his Australian Grand Prix weekend short.
Fans of all ages are watching on at the start of this Moto2 session. Delayed by about 35 minutes we are, in case you're just joining. But yeah, good to see Philip Salat out there, and there were some doubts as to but it seems as though that run this time was done with minimal
referenced a moment ago. There they are. Knew that they would be. The saga continues, it says at the bottom. Yeah, it's a saga that's ran over several years. And Tony Arbolino has seen it. Yes, I don't think any sign that refers to you as gorgeous is going to spoil your mood too much. Tony Arbolino, a truly gorgeous performance here back in 2022 when he won the Malaysian Grand Prix. Hasn't really shown any signs of repeating that kind of performance through 2025 at least. As he, I guess, will be a little pleased or a little relieved to see that the Boscoscuros appear to have a little bit more of a fighting chance so far here.
Yeah, quite excited to see the Lewis Sotheby fan club whenever the camera picks up on it. I'm sure it will at some point.
The girlfriend's not here, unfortunately, so I don't think we'll be seeing any signs. If anything, you've perhaps set some of the fans here a challenge, so who knows? If there are any of you out there, first of all, what's wrong with you? And second of all, make your voices heard. Marcos Ramirez will be looking to put his case forward to show why he belongs on this grid next season. Of course, there have been all sorts of rumours floating about, which in fairness the American racing team have tried to quieten down, that Marcos Ramirez might not be as secure as we thought at that team for next season. 3 crashes he had during the Australian Grand Prix weekend, including a big one in qualifying. Ramirez 17th at the end of play earlier on today. The circuit, which in fairness he has gone very well at in the last couple of years.
Yeah, 2 enormous crashes off those 3 as well. One of them coming up. Off turn 12, the final turn. Philip did not want to be crashing there anywhere on the calendar. And Ramirez, thankfully, was relatively okay. So certainly on pace from Phillip Island wasn't quite his usual self. Qualified in the front row, second time out in Argentina. Really thought back then that we were going to see a best ever season from Andalusian, but recently it has healed off in quite spectacular fashion and inside the top 10. Right. It's a good track for him. He has gone by, perhaps he can find his way out quicker.
Just 16 points in 7 races since the summer break. Ramirez just to underline how far his form has dropped off the proverbial cliff so far this year. Still time for him to turn that around though. As mentioned, very good record here in Sepang. As practice gets underway, and a practice session which at least at the start of it is going to take place perhaps not in full dry conditions, because you can see a few damp patches as we go around the lap, but certainly on the racing line it is bone dry. The dry tyre is fitted, which will be particularly a relief to this man, Manu Gonzalez, who perhaps not be quite as weak in the wet as he was back in Austin when we saw him in qualifying 1, but without question, when you're a championship leader with plenty to lose, you don't want extra variables thrown in the mix by the weather.
Yeah, you certainly don't when you have not great memories of riding in the rain from earlier in the year. Although it said there has been marked improvements in a couple of wet sessions that we've had, but still I wouldn't place my money on Manu Gonzalez if we had a wet race on Sunday. And you can see our championship really has heightened up a great deal. Just 2 points in it between Gonzalez and Moreira in a fight that you have to imagine is going to go the distance away until mid-November in Valencia. MotoGP and Moto3 may well be decided, but Moto2 looks as though it is going to be the showstopper category for this year. It has been this kind of relentless run from Diogo Moreira off late that has made it happen really. As Lewis said, 60-point deficit he faced going into the summer break after the Grand Prix of Czechia. He has managed to narrow that down to 58 points across 7 races, which works out an average of 8 points a race he has managed to gain of the championship leader.
And that's Roy Anwar, who's had a crash early on one of our 2 Malaysian wildcards this weekend in Moto2. Anwar on the 20 bike, his teammate Helmi Hassan on the 55, in case you're spotting either of them in this Malaysian Grand Prix weekend. An early crash for Anwar would appear to have gone down at turn 7, according to our track map. So we'll let these initial laps play out. It's interesting to look at the comparison actually between the top 2 of the World Championship. There is Asman, the second of the wildcards on the 55. When you try to sort of work out or analyse how Gonzalez and Moreira have gone about their title campaigns this season and looking at their various strengths and weaknesses. In terms of qualifying head-to-head between the 2 this season, we've had 19 rounds. Gonzalez 13-6 up on Moreira in terms of outright qualifying performance, although Moreira has taken pole in the last 2 Grand Prix, so perhaps the most recent qualifying form is in favour of the Brazilian. In terms of race finishes, and we are including DNFs in this, so that does skew the picture somewhat. Moreira's actually 10-9 up on Manu Gonzalez through this season. We have had a couple of DNFs or non-scores for me. Scott Moreira didn't score and didn't finish in either Sachsenring or Brunel, although Sachsenring he was probably on course to finish ahead of Gonzalez before he went off the road in that collision with Jake Dixon. In terms of victories this season, it's 4-3 to Manu Gonzalez, and in terms of podium, it's 9-8 to Manu Gonzalez. But in terms of their overall race performances, not an awful lot to choose between them. To those stats and deeper into that head-to-head, the more recent history, the more recent post-summer break history is very much skewed towards Diogo Moreira, which is, I guess, a momentum that Manu Gonzalez wants to kind of reverse. It's very difficult to know just how much or how overplayed momentum is in motorcycle racing, because in many respects every single Grand Prix is an event, a one-off event in of itself, for which they find together to ultimately decide who our world champion is and who is going to miss out. So with every Grand Prix comes an opportunity for Manu Gonzalez to reverse that momentum, but it's all about, I guess, putting out of your mind the Grand Prix that have come past and the points that Diogo Moreira have come out at you. And again, if you're Manu Gonzalez or Diogo Moreira, you're essentially starting the season from now and looking at this as a 3-round championship.
Yeah, you're trying to ride off what has gone before, which isn't necessarily that easy when, well, many different things have happened. You can see Moreira there has a bit of a save coming through turn number 9. There's a low speed moment there, but thrown up and out of the saddle. Looks as though he is recovered with a minimum of fuss. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Lewis. If you're to look at the whole season, it is pretty much nip and tuck in terms of who's beaten the other one on track, who's had more wins or more positions. But if you look at recent form, it is very one-sided indeed. There's no question the momentum is currently with Diogo Moreira, who's had 5 podium finishes in the last 7 rounds, and 2 of those have been victories. Compare that to Manu Gonzalez, who's had 2 podiums in the last 8 rounds, hasn't won a race almost since Mugello, all the way back in June. So, yeah, you wouldn't count Gonzalez's recent run of 3rd, 4th, 6th, 5th, DNF, 7th, and Championship 4. And he would obviously make the argument that had he not been disqualified in Indonesia and finished 2nd there, then it would be a completely different picture, and he would have just been seen as to be managing his championship. But the fact is that he's taken advantage of some race weekends when he was really, really strong. He's even stronger than Moreira. And perhaps he was maybe thinking about the championship too much rather than really going into the kill when it was possible. So, yeah, Gonzalez knows that basically, as Lewis said, it starts from 0 here and to go on the attack once more.
It's another fascination of the mental approach, the mental battle that the riders face when they are fighting for a world championship, because in many respects, it's easy for from our point of view up in the commentary box to say, well, from Manu's point of view, why don't you just continue doing what you were at the start of the season? That's what put you in that position. You got in that position by attacking, by getting yourself on the front row of the grid, by not being conservative, not being cautious. But I guess it's human nature, isn't it? When you've got so much to lose, when you have the luxury of a World Championship points lead, to try and manage through the season, I guess it's very easy to go into conservation mode and to just think about being risk averse rather than ultimately trying to go for the big points when you have so much to lose.
Yeah, I remember World Championship winning crew chief Peter Baum saying on a couple of occasions that going into the summer break with a pretty healthy margin in the championship can be a really dangerous thing. Peter experienced that with Stefan Bradl, I think, in the 2011 Moto2 World Championship when he was miles clear of Marc Marquez. Going into the summer break, the same thing with Danny Kent in 2015 when Kent eventually won his Moto3 Championship. Had a crash for Jorge Navarro, that's his second of the day. Crashed on at turn 9 earlier on, and it looks as though he's come a cropper up in turn 1 on this particular occasion. But yeah, you start the season, a kind of blaze of glory, and then when it doesn't quite manage to come together, start the second half of the season, suddenly you find you're riding a bit defensively, and it can be very, very difficult to kind of reverse that mindset where you're going from defensive riding into, oh no, I have to attack again. And suddenly the pressure just starts building up, and it can be a very difficult thing. Peter obviously went on to win those two championships with Bradl and with Danny Kent, but I think they were maybe a bit too close for his riders' liking in those particular years.
Did you see a defensive Manu Gonzalez in Australia on the Sunday, or was it simply an attacking Manu Gonzalez until the tyre prevented him from attacking?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think generally speaking he's been maybe thinking about the championship in the second part of the year, but it seems as though Australia was just all in, and he wanted to go up and try and run with Pereira as much as he could in the first half of the race. And yeah, I don't think he was potentially thinking so much about rear tire conservation when he was doing that. It was more just trying to beat this guy at all costs, and that both backfired ever so slightly. And I don't know, race, I felt it was a little bit personal. It was like Manu Gonzalez really had it in his head, like, I have to beat this guy no matter what here today. And to be fair, at no point in the weekend did it look as though he'd be capable of doing that. So the fact that he was up there, at least giving a bit of a fight, I thought was fairly commendable, but eventually that rear tire wear did come back to bite him in those quarter laps, because he had absolutely nothing for the likes of Baltus or for Danny Holgado when they came through.
The expectation is that Manu Gas is going to be much more competitive here this weekend. He's currently in 8th place. Extraordinary how close it is. I know we say this first weekend in Moto2, but we are talking about one of the longest circuits on the calendar here. 5.5 kilometres in length, 3.4 miles, and just 3/10 covers the top 12. Outside of that at the moment in 14th is Ivan Ortola, and he's now launched his second crash of the day. He's gone down through turn 2.
Ortola crashed up in turn 8 towards the start of FP1. Now he's crashed at the start of practice, and that really is not the best way to try and get up to speed on a Moto2 machine on your first visit to a circuit. So a complicated day for the MSI squad. His teammate Harrison Boyd also suffered a crash in FP1. Ortola had a decent early lap in this session in 14th, less than half a second off from the Arbolino's fastest time. Well, that's really worked out for him. Turn 1 does seem to be a bit of a problem point. Turn 1, turn 2, we obviously saw Roberts have that massive crash in high side coming out of turn 2, which eventually left him on the floor through turn 3. Fell that far. So it's just pointing out on the timing screen so far, understandable the Californian is feeling his way into this session. You have to imagine he's 5 seconds off Arbolino's quickest time.
Last and third lap at the moment for the American racing duo. Marcos Ramirez currently in 27th place on 2:07.3, but still very early days in this session. Expect that to get more competitive, assuming Joe Roberts' physical condition allows it. As David Alonso negotiates the off-camber final corner. Winner of this Moto3 race here last season. Podium finisher a week ago at Phillip Island was Alonso. Quite some physical toll on him in the last stages. Alonso hung on for second place, more yellow flags coming out. Hopefully a practice session will break out soon in amongst all these yellow flags. Turn 4 this time has seen the yellows come out. Danny Munoz, who's responsible for those. 17 goes down. Munoz has had a really strong start to the session. He's up in 3rd place. That could soon change though, because here comes the World Championship leader who's attacking Aaron Kinnett here into the final corner. Manu Gonzalez looking to get on with this session, and he very nearly tucked the front there as he came up the inside of Aaron Kinnett, so it's just not quite coming together yet for Manu Gonzalez. There are enough signs to suggest that he's competitive so far here. He cannot string all that together. What looked like P1 ends up with a P8 time, and no improvement on what he's done so far. A 2:04.7 is Gonzalez's best. He's less than 2/10 off the pace, but that's currently only good enough for P8.
Nice little warning ahead of Sunday if he's trying to make an overtake into that final turn. Where the limit is, he was right on the limit there as he tried to overtake his compatriot. Gonzalez has been absolutely adamant right the way through the season that the rider that's currently in front of him on track, the number 44, Aaron Kinnett, was going to be the one to watch over the full championship distance. You can see there marching over the curves on the exit of turn 4. Manu certainly is absolutely on the limit here at the start of this practice session. And here is a replay on the inside of Kinnett. Everything's going to plan at the moment, and you can see the front just a bit of a move there. Wow, actually a pretty impressive save on his left knee.
Yeah, that's the risk you have with that negative camber corner. It's easy just to drift out wide. Stated on his left knee. Of course, what Manu can't afford in a session like this is a crash in this practice session. Impress the team. Or perhaps want a slightly calmer afternoon experience than that. Crashed in both sessions on Friday in Australia, Gonzalez. Didn't come to a place too soon, but cost him valuable mileage and homework that he could put in ahead of the Grand Prix himself on the Sunday. Gonzalez avoiding that particular pitfall this afternoon. Arbolino fastest at the moment then from Salach and Munoz. Looking good once again from a Boscascuro persuasion. 1st, 2nd, 4th and 5th with Guevara and Dixon next up. Moreira 6th ahead of Arenas, Gonzalez, Alonso and Kinnett, who's in 10th place. Chano Pranix Estridge, the 11's up in P11, whilst his teammates having some problems today. 2 crashes for Jorge Navarro. Estridge having a very good day so far. He was up in 14th earlier on today. He's less than 3/10 off the pace in 11th place. There's Octavan Gorba, who had 1 crash and 1 big save at turn 9 earlier on today. 12 from Barry Baltus and Ivan Ortola, who we've already seen down at turn 2.
You may have been wondering what was Philip Salach doing, poking his knees out of his bearing on the run on the back straight. That was just to increase the basically area of slipstream for Jake Dixon to get in behind to hopefully improve his top speed. Very, very promising stuff to Mark Villiers runners here in this session as we temporarily lose our screens.
Yeah, so if we're not reacting to what you just saw from Barry Baltus, it's not our fault. We faded to black, unfortunately, here in the cover trucks for a moment, but we're seeing clearly now as Barry approaches turn 14.
Go back to Salach. Bumped into him yesterday, just after he was up in a bit of a briefing in the media centre, and asked him what actually happened to Philip Salach. Not about having this moment which tweaked your shoulder. He said basically he was coming through the hedge. Imagine what happened with Manu Gonzalez, where he tucked the front and just slid off and started barrel rolling through the gravel. Well, Philip lost the front through the hay shed, somehow managed to save it on his right elbow, pushed himself back up, and in that kind of movement, I think, tweaked his shoulder somewhat. And he said it was quite a miracle that he didn't actually crash. And we know how fast it is, well over 100 miles an hour. So what a pretty heroic way to tweak your shoulder. It wasn't as if it was done in a kind of slow speed manner. It was something fairly epic and quite scary as well. So Philip to have improved his physical condition over the last couple of days, and he's so competitive here. It's pretty impressive going at the start of this practice session.
Munoz, who has at least got his iron machine back to the box. We haven't seen his crash yet, but the bike is just in the foreground there. I think we're about to see it into turn 4. We're stepped out a little bit under braking. Front washes away mid-corner. A lot of damage done to that machine. So Danny Munoz, who, as mentioned, is having a very fine session so far in terms of his performance and his pace. P3 at the moment on a 2:04.719. Some minor repair work to be carried out in the IO box. Lap times are Around about half a second off what we saw earlier on today. Jake Dixon's lap record of a 2:04.1. We're currently doing 2:04.6s with Arbolino and Salah. Sun has come out, track temperature will have gone up ever so slightly, although perhaps any rubber that had been laid down was washed away with that monsoon that came in, and some oil to be thrown in for good measure during MotoGP and the sessions following that.
Just having a quick look down the timing screens here. From the riders that are currently circulating on track, the likes of Aaron Canet, for example, David Alonso, they're doing high 205s basically in this session. They're doing Huertas as well. Senna Aegis is in the low 206s. But Manu Gonzalez is doing high 204s, so essentially about a second. He's on. So Gonzalez may be down at 8, not troubling the fastest time of the session on this run, but it does look fairly promising in terms of consistency.
Barrera's also doing low 206s with about throw, which compares quite favourably to what Manu Gonzalez is currently doing. We now follow the World Championship leader onto the back straight, alongside the spectacular grandstand, which is a bit of a trademark and a symbol of this Sepang circuit, the double-sided grandstand, which we're part of. Commentary box, we're the other side of the grandstand as you now look on your left, with a wonderful view of the back straight approaching the final corner. If you just have up the option to do so, if you just head round to the other side of the grandstand, you'll see the start-finish straight where Colin Vire is currently approaching. We could have two IO bikes inside the top 4 very shortly. 26th at the moment for Vire. He gains 13 places just to underline how ridiculously close Moto2 is today. Colin Vire is less than a third of a second off the pace, but he's barely in the top 14.
Yeah, less than half a second covering the top 14 riders as it stands, which is fairly remarkable considering we are within half a second of the outright circuit record here in the Moto2 category in this session so far. You have to imagine that we're going to get pretty close to the lap record, maybe even surpass it towards the end of this session when the riders stick in soft tyres and go for a fast time, but as it stands, most riders are out there working on their race rhythm. Aaron Canet, after leading Manu Gonzalez around for several laps, has decided to come into the frantic box. Just looking at Canet's racing history, this has never been a good track for him, Lewis. He has raced here on 8 occasions, a best result of 8th place. He managed to secure that 4 different times. I'm talking about Moto3 and the Moto2. Never higher than 8. Lots of DNFs in there as well. So fair to say that Canet's never really been super competitive when we come here to Malaysia. And well, frankly speaking, another bad weekend here, or a weekend where he's behind the likes of Gonzalez, Barrera, and it will be Kurt for his championship hopes in 2025.
But he took the last season, didn't secure it second in the championship on what I think it was a very emotional weekend, of course. The news of the tragic floods in Valencia was just beginning to come to light while we were here in Sepang last year, and Canet, of course, as a Valencia boy, was very hardly affected by that. He did at least emerge from that weekend with something to smile about. Crashed with Darren Binder too early in this session. Looks like he's gone down in the final corner. Binder has had a spectacular get-offs here over the years. You can forget his brake failure that he suffered here a couple of years ago in Moto2. Turn 15. Hopes at least is a much smaller crash for him on this occasion, and there indeed is the evidence of that. Small scratch to the side of his Corsini Calyx, but Binder is at least trying to get that bike up and running and back up pit lane.
That was done in turn 1, wasn't it? 2 years ago here. Good memory of that, Lewis. It slipped from my mind, but yeah, good to see Darren back up and running. Caught up with him over the lunch break actually, and he was saying that just this year, anytime he's gone to a track with high grip, and they've had that super soft rear tire, 25, he said it's been such a struggle for him. Generally speaking, when the grip has been a lot lower and things are sliding around a bit more, then that's kind of Darren Binder's condition. But when it hasn't been like that, he really has struggled. And he was quite annoyed that he wasn't quite able to build on that excellent qualifying position of 9th in Phillip Island. Ended up coming home in 14th, but felt that his speed over that weekend was much, much improved. Telling me also that was looking at a move across to the British Superbike Championship next year. Said that's gone a bit quiet at the moment, so as things stand, he might be moving across to Little America into 2026, which I think would be a bit of a boon for that series. Obviously, we had a really epic end to the Superbike Championship of Moto America this year with Bobby Fong, Cameron Bobier, previously of this parish in Moto2, and
right up the wide, didn't
he did, yeah, so the final race. Josh Heron as well started up with the third hit in that title fight. Really great spectacle. Final one there a couple of weeks ago. Darren Binder could well be joining the likes of Cameron Bobier in 2026. So it does look as though, for all intents and purposes, his time in this paddock is over. He was saying himself it's just been such a tough year. Really struggled for results. At any point, just one top 6 finish. One top 10 finish as well for Darren Binder in 2025. His third year in Moto2. Frankly speaking, it's a results-based business, and those results don't quite cut it, unfortunately, at this level. Darren, I think, is aware of that as anyone.
Binder didn't take a best qualifying in Australia since round 2 in Argentina, but faded in the race, which disappointed him. But it's the first time in a full year that Binder has taken back-to-back points finishes in Moto2. Go back to Japan in Australia last year for the last time Binder has achieved that.
He was also saying small things, but actually has pretty big consequences. It isn't all Italian side of the garage that he faces, and while he says his technicians are very, very capable, good engineers, just the language barrier is really quite a big thing to overcome. As he said, his telemetry engineer speaks pretty good English, but sometimes communication just isn't quite what it needs to be communicating in high-stress situations.
A very distinctive South African accent that Karen has, which sometimes even we struggle to understand.
Yeah. And he was very keen to point out he wasn't saying anything negative about their capabilities as engineers or about the Mercedes team. It was just sometimes that language barrier can be a bit of a tricky thing to overcome. So yeah, that's another perhaps reason why it just hasn't quite gone to plan for the number 15 this year.
So what kind of lap times is Diogo Moreira doing at the moment? Gonzalez did eventually pit at the end of that runway. He was doing fairly consistent low 205s. Moreira largely trading in the low 206s, 206.5 for Moreira. He's now put 11 laps on those tyres, although it's always difficult to know just how much to read into this from Diogo Moreira's point of view. Generally just finds an extra gear on the crucial moments of the weekend anyway. And Moreira is doing pretty consistent lap times, perhaps just leaving a little bit of margin in hand when he truly needs it.
You know what Matt would say, because he's out there alone.
Yeah, he's not following.
He's got a 2 up ahead, although we do suggest, of course. But yeah, Moreira, judging by his lap times, currently he's doing mid-206s. Manu Gonzalez is in the 204s just a couple of laps ago before he pitted. So at this stage, it does look as though the number 18 is a lot better equipped to deal with a longer run, but it is only Friday, and how often is that in the second half of the year, Lewis, when Gonzalez looked definitely a lot stronger on a Friday and just did not come to pass on the Sunday.
And what's interesting too is that Gonzalez, in terms of outright fastest lap times, although he did make that mistake when he was passing Canet into turn 15 when he potentially could have gone P1, is that Manu Gonzalez is currently in 8th place behind Diogo Moreira, and we have had Grand Prix very recently where Manu has looked the fastest rider in overall race rhythm, but he's been stuck in traffic. We thought in Motegi when he took pole position he would be very difficult to beat. He had a nightmare start, ran into Celestino Vietti and picked up a long lap penalty, could only finish 5th. And then of course in Indonesia it was built up as the Moreira versus Gonzalez battle, and when Manu Gonzalez got himself into 2nd place after again a rather modest start, he ultimately wasn't able to chase Diogo Moreira down. And it certainly feels from Moreira's point of view as if he goes in with the attitude of, yeah, just get me on the front row of the grid and I'll take it from there. I'll do the rest once I get myself up at the front of the race. Manu Gonzalez generally as good as he's been, and he has produced some great comeback rides, particularly at Aragon early in the season. Gonzalez more of the front when it comes to Moto2 winning.
Yeah, that's a good shout. I guess there's been a couple of exceptions. You mentioned Aragon. Sachsenring, I guess, was another one where he qualified badly, crashed at the start of a wet qualifying session and managed to come through to 4th on the qualifying down in 16th. But yeah, generally speaking, he has started towards the front of the grid, and it hasn't always quite played out. There's 1 or 2 other situations you could probably look back on, the likes of Austria, where he was, well, it seemed on Friday and Saturday, clearly the fastest guy of anyone. yeah, didn't get a great start, didn't have a good first lap. He still felt he had the rhythm to win the race from where he was, but of course he then had a stone through the radiator and was forced to retire in very unfortunate circumstances. But again, the start of that race didn't quite play out as he would have wanted it to or envisioned. So yeah, again, far too early to read in to how the race will go.
So Diogo Moreira currently in 6th place, who's perhaps under a bit of pressure late in this session. We've got 13 minutes of the session remaining, and the vast majority of the riders are in the pits. In fact, one rider who is under a bit of pressure has just left the pits. Danny Holgado, who's down in 17th place on a 2:05.182. Last year's winner, Celestino Vietti, in 18th, as we take a look there at the recent run of Manny Gonzalez, who understands the kind of speed showing. So Vietti 18th. Currently got tentangrace, the Australian Grand Prix winner, down in 21st place. Did catch a quick word with Chad Davies during the lunch break, former World Superbike winner around Sepang, and involved with the Aegis camp here this weekend. You can see that around circuits with longer braking zones, quite play to the strengths of Senna Aegis, around faster flowing circuits where you can really carry the corner speed. You don't have to worry about heavy braking so much. As we've seen with Silverstone, as we've seen with Phillip Island, Senna Aegis is quite exceptional. But he pointed out Mategi as a good example, did Chaz, of Senna Aegis is has slight weakness around these corner circuits, where he used to qualify down in 20th in Japan, and then crashed at turn 5 whilst trying to recover from that poor qualifying. At the moment, once again, he does appear at a circuit that perhaps doesn't quite play to his strengths. Senna is having a slightly tricky Friday.
Yeah, numerous very heavy braking points on this track, like turn 1, turn 2. On at turn 9 again, turn 14 and turn 15, the final 2 turns on this track, all very heavy braking zones. It does have some decent flow in parts, certainly around these corners, which Danny Holgado is currently negotiating. The lines of turns 5, 6, 7 and 8 really are fantastic corners. Aside from the weather, obviously it's pretty warm here all year round. It is just a fantastic track to do. A great deal of testing because it does have that variety. You can see Danny Holgado with a bit of a moment down into turn number 9 there on the front end. It looks as though number 27 is on course to jump up the order here.
Holgado currently in 17th place, of course was in qualifying 1 in Australia a week ago. Recovered expertly from that. Q1 appearance that was largely down to a crash in this session. Holgado though still out on track at the end of the session and building as this lap unfolds. And he might not be a million miles away from Jake Dixon's all-time lap record here.
Holgado currently in the final section. We just see Joe Roberts leaving the pit lane. Are hearing that Joe is in some serious pain after that crash. It's really not surprising at all, but decided to ride through it. Say even though he's down in 27th, to be 2.5 seconds off only after such a huge prank earlier today is pretty gritty stuff from the Californian, as Danny Holgado does go faster, but it's not in that record, or to be frank, not even really close to what Jake Dixon was able to do earlier today. But a 2:04.6 is enough to lead this practice session. Holgado jumps up from 17th into the lead.
He's giving up a lot in the top speed tracks, is Holgado, 8 kilometres an hour, doing the very fastest. That was a moment on the curbs there as he scrubbed up the speed to turn 7, which is a corner you have to be millimetre precise in, because turn 8 is immediately in your face once you completed 7. It's so important to get the run out of 8 down to the back straight, which leads up to turn 9. Holgado, all that advantage that he had going into the final sector, he lost all but 5,000ths of it over Tony Arbolino by the time he reached the finish line. But Holgado continuing on his way and once again setting left to time.
He's getting a little bit unsteady through that change of direction, coming out of turn 5 into turn 6. Very spectacular indeed. Does Danny, the bike is moving quite a bit under him, but you can see he's right on the pace here. Fantastic stuff to watch, and one of the more impressive things about Danny Holgado, as well as the victories that he's secured this year, 2 of them in Barcelona and in Japan, is the fact that he's now 6th in the World Championship, which shows that just as well as those great results, he has more often than not been fairly consistent there or thereabouts in the sharp end of the top 10, certainly since the summer break. He has been a regular there, and I'll be the first one to hold up my hands and admit I was not expecting this from number 27. He's been, along with Barry Valentine, the big surprise of the season in this class.
I mentioned earlier on this morning, but it is worth reiterating. Holgado can clinch the Rookie of the Year prize here this weekend. He scored 2 points more than his teammate David Alonso on Sunday afternoon. After over 17 laps, then Holgado will be your star rookie of 2025, which he fully deserves on the performances that he's demonstrated so far this season. Is he going to get the final sector slightly more correct this time? We saw him lose a lot of time to Arbolino last time, but he put that right. The answer is sort of 2:04.320 now for Holgado. He's now 3/10 clear of Tony Arbolino.
You may think Rookie of the Year not that important, but I can tell you, each of the rookies in this category will be placed a great deal of importance on who wins that. And when your competitors for that gong in Moto2 in 2025 with David Alonso, Colin Bayer, reigning World Supersport champion Adrian Huertas, or I should say former World Supersport champion Adrian Huertas, you can see that the competition is fairly fierce.
Yeah, congratulations to Stefano Manzi, who clinched the Supersport crown in Jerez a week ago. Jumped straight onto a to a 165 machine and did a pretty impeccable job by all accounts on the Yamaha machine. So Lopez, who's having a very uncomfortable ride out of 9 and very nearly got in the way there of the MSI Boscascuro right behind him, Ivan Ortola, who once again is rebuilding a session after a crash. Very nearly had a face full of another Boscascuro there, with Lopez lighting up the rear tyre on the way out of turn 9. Lopez at the moment down in 17th place. His teammate Chelsea Novietti 1 place behind in 18th. Some of the early optimism from this morning is in danger of seeping away.
Hold on to your hats. You feel in those final 7 minutes you're going to see quite a bit of movement inside the top 14. So once again, Sarge plays toe for Jake Dixon coming down into the final sector. Dixon is on course as Lopez runs off track in turn 15. Dixon is on course to go second here with his lap time as he comes across the line. The Englishman jumps up in fact into the fastest time of the afternoon so far, just narrowly short of his time that he did this morning, less than a tenth off. With Dixon now, sets down a marker towards the end of this session.
Yeah, clearly Holgado is losing a little bit of time relative to the very best through there, because Dixon overturned a pretty sizable margin to go top in the end. And look at what Alonso Lopez has been up to, up behind Dixon. So he had his elbow down there in the middle of turn 1. It's Dixon from Arenas now, just as we ended in pre-practice 1 this morning.
Mark Media's crew look on. It has been a really positive day for both their riders so far. Dixon fastest this morning, fastest this session as well, although hard long. Look at this from Manny Gonzalez, look at this from Barry Baltus as well. We're seeing a whole host of red sectors on our timing screens. Also for Danny Munoz, Yuma Sasaki, Albert Arenas and David Alonso all going very quick, as is Colin Bayer too. Don't really know where to look on this track at the moment, but we pick up with the two Intact GP boys. Gonzalez currently towards his teammate Sandy Aegis right, and Aegis is on course to jump up and make big progress towards the end of this session here.
So we're keeping an eye on Aaron Canette's exercise too, because Canette's on the bubble at the moment in 14th place. Could get bumped out if Aegis improves once again. That bike moving around for Gonzalez on the way out of the final corner. How much damage has that done to his potential session dropping time? Not enough to drop in behind Dixon. A 2:04.166 now for Manu Gonzalez. Aegis behind him improves and just creeps into the top 14 at the expense of Canette.
Decent stuff then from Aegis into 13th. Will that be enough for a spot in Q2? Automatic spot in Q2 tomorrow? Probably not. I need to improve on that again. See if Barry Baltus is able to depose Manu Gonzalez from top spot. He's going to have a nice little tow coming across the line from Danny Munoz. Could this be another new lap record here at the Sepang International Circuit? It is not quite. 4th place for Baltus.
Canette then is coming towards the final corner now. We are right on board with Aaron. 16 at the moment, up to 7. He's second to 2/10 of a second off the pace. So it's now Moreira we need to keep an eye on. The second in the championship, the Brazilian's currently down in 13th place. Zonta van den Gorberg has gone down for the second time today. And Aaron Canette there with an apology to one of the Honda Team Asia riders, who he nearly clattered into on the outside of turn 1.
Yeah, you can see a replay of that, but I think Canette misjudged just how much space he had in the outside of turn number 1 there. Zonta van den Gorberg's had his second crash of the day. Where is that? That's not in turn 4, of course, yeah. So Zonta losing the front there, and it's not been the best of days for the Dutchman. Currently down in 17th, so his chances of top 14 place in practice session are as good as done. And here's what happened with Canet a few weeks ago. He was on the edge of the track, and Canet looked at the screen and got somewhat distracted, only momentarily. And
lucky that Cooney saw it coming.
Yeah. I think Valencia acknowledged that was certainly his own mistake. And yeah, keep your eyes on the tracker on.
Yeah, there's the big screen just off to the left. Then all of a sudden, whoops, there's a Honda Team Asia rider right on my left that I need to steer clear of. So a little hand of apology for Canet. And we'll see whether the stewards choose to have a look at that. But we'll have a look now at Diogo Moreira, who could really do with this lap just to give himself a little bit more comfort zone at the moment to extend a range in 11 thousandths of a second at the moment between Moreira and potential qualifying one here this weekend. Let's see how he completes the final sector, and he now climbs up into the top 10 for 2:04.6. That means he is now safe by the massive margin of a tenth and a half.
Yeah, it is so tight in this session, just 0.6 of a second, covering the top 14 as it stands. He's another one looking to do a live rescue job here in practice. We haven't spoken about last year's victor in this circuit in Moto2 that much today, but it looks as though Vietti has lost big old chunks of time in sector number 3. I think he's not going to be gaining more than half a second back in the final sector, so Vietti's going to have another go on his next lap. Agius, after briefly getting himself up inside the top 14, has been pushed back out again after the improvements from Tony Arbolino, Diogo Moreira. Alexis Bridge has somehow found himself up inside the top 8. That's an impressive time from the Glen Forward factory team rider.
I was just about to draw attention to that. A 2:04.462 for Alexis Bridge, who did put in, to be fair, to a 2:05.1 this morning, which put him inside the top 14, but at the moment he's cruising through qualifying 2 for time for this year. Fast McCroom for Marcos Ramirez in American Racing at the moment. He's in 27th place. Roberts has got himself up to 24, and a 2:05.2, given how he's feeling, just a second off the pace, is not a bad lap time at all. It's not going to get the American through to qualifying 2. And at the moment, after half a second when missing in the third sector, this isn't going to cut it for Ramirez either.
Really struggling in sector number 3, Marcos Ramirez. He would not be surprised if his confidence took a real battering after a couple of those fast crashes. We saw him fall down in Siberia at one point during the Australian Grand Prix, and spiking that he did the same on Saturday, qualifying, coming out of the final turn. So a couple of real fast crashes like that. It's understandable that maybe confidence and lack of feeling the bike is just a little bit less than what it should be, but Ramirez does improve up into 20th, and we are of course talking about such fine margins here, less than a second off, yet he finds himself down in 20th, but it looks as though it's going to be a trip through Q1 for the Andalusian.
So Ivan Artola, who's trying to bump his fellow rookie out of the top 14 here for a second crash of the day for the MSI rider, so we're going to improve on this current lap. With no real sector times to improve, that are going to change the top 14 at the moment. Potentially the very best of the super soft rear tyre has now gone. Just under 30 seconds. We'll have one more lap available to him, so too will Mario Angi, who's getting a little just behind Ortola, who left the Indonesian through. Decided to scrap the end of this lap and just focus on a good run down the main straight to start his final lap of the afternoon. Ortola needs to improve by just over a tenth of a second to find his way into qualifying 2, but has he got any remaining grip on that super soft rear tyre to achieve it? Oh no, he hasn't.
Goodness me, even Ortola's already had 2 crashes today. Very close to adding to that tally. Very lucky not to lose the front yet again down in turn number 1. Yeah, I think we have seen the very best of soft rear tyres, Lewis, because all grey sectors coming up on our screens for the riders that haven't yet taken the checkered flag. You can see a replay off Ortola. A nice move on Mario Angi, but look how good it's been. Probably got midway right turn number 1. He is down on his knee and his elbow. Some looks of concern down in the MSI box.
Yeah, well, you might say that, Ivan, they might be saying, after we've already had to make some relatively minor repairs on 2 occasions already today, after Ivan dropped the bike down the road, avoided a third there, so I guess we can call it 2.5 crashes for Ivan Artola today.
And Luke, the technician there, said you'd be doing the repairs on the bike if
you're staying until 11 o'clock tonight to fix that.
Oh, so thankfully he hasn't given them that headache, so great to see that from Ortola. As we pick up with Aaron Canet, nothing really of note to tell you about on our timing screens. It looks as though the order that you see on the left-hand side of your screens is what we're going to have as these final practice standings. Manu Gonzalez has been the benchmark in this session. Pretty sure when we go through the lap-by-lap analysis at the end of play, Lewis, we'll be picking Gonzalez out as potentially the favourite going into Saturday. But that doesn't necessarily mean too much, as we've seen across the last 2 months or so of Moto2 action. Good to see though that all the championship contenders are relatively there in the mix. Canet in 7th, Joe Ferreira in 10th. Really strong day for Jake Dixon second this morning. Sorry, first this morning. It looks as though he's going to end the afternoon in second.
So much will hinge on that crucial 15 minutes of qualifying 2, which all of the championship contenders are through to. One of the qualifying sessions of the season last weekend in Phillip Island, where each of the 3 title contenders have their own stories to tell. With Moreira setting lap records, with Canet recovering from that big crash at the start of the session. This is the instant where Cooney has to leap out of his way when Canet was preoccupied with seeing where he was on the big screen, and yeah, I think the further proof of how ultra polite Yuki Cooney is. He puts a left-handed apology when he's done absolutely nothing wrong.
And there is the screen highlighted to the left of your screen that Aaron Canet was looking at just to check where he was at the timing tower. And after that brief glance to his left, when he focused back on track, he did see maybe quite precariously posted himself at the edge of turn 1. Thankfully, it was just a very scare. Didn't have any further repercussions, but I guess Canet can be happy enough with that. Lewis, not so far away, just over a tenth of a second off Manu Gonzalez's quickest time, which is more or less around the fastest lap we've ever seen in Moto2 class here around Sepang.
In case anyone was wondering whether Manu Gonzalez was feeling the heat of the title chase,
more or less around the fastest lap we've ever seen.
Of a response. Gonzalez, but I don't think anyone can argue against the fact that that is his response.
A little bit shaky,
Gonzalez, but I don't think anyone
had points in FP1 this morning, did Gonzalez, but there's a lot more like it. Yeah, looked a little bit shaky, a little bit out of control at points in FP1 this morning, did Gonzalez, but there's a lot more like it. Certainly looked very fast after about 8 or 9 laps as well, doing laps in the 2-minute 4s, which is a very competitive pace indeed. From the relative struggles of Phillip Island, where they had just one bike in the top 14, Buster Skuro looked to be back as well, with Dixon up in second. Also saw good times for Philip Salach, who was shuffled back in the end down to 11th. Tony Arbolino also inside the top 10 in 9th.
Manu, at least this afternoon, provided ultra polite Yuki Cooney is.
To the left of your screen. Scare didn't have any further repercussions, but I guess Canet can be happy enough with that. Lewis, not so far away, just over a tenth of a second off Manu Gonzalez's quickest time, which is more or less around the fastest lap we've ever seen in the Moto2 class here around Sepang.
In case anyone was wondering whether Manu Gonzalez was feeling the heat of the title chase, well, Manu, at least this afternoon, provided something of a response. It's fair to say that it was a scrappy at times pre-practice 1 session for Manu Gonzalez, but I don't think anyone can argue against the fact that that is exactly the Friday practice session that Manu Gonzalez was looking for.
Yeah, looked a little bit shaky, a little bit out of control at points in FP1 this morning, did Gonzalez, but there was a lot more like it. Certainly looked very fast after about 8 or 9 laps as well, doing laps in the 2-minute 4s, which is very competitive pace indeed. The relative struggles of Phillip Island, where they had just one bike in the top 14, Buster Skuro looked to be back as well. 99. This year, our 25th time of racing in this part of magnificent Malaysia. It packs a punch as well. Does Sepang. The heat, the humidity, and a fast and flowing layout makes it one of the most demanding entire calendar. Turn 7 calls out Alex Marquez this morning in an FP1 session which concluded in very, very wet conditions. Dry though as it stands as we head into the crucial practice session. Good afternoon and welcome back to what, as you can see from these live pictures, is a rather overcast and rather cloudy Kuala Lumpur. It's the Grand Prix of Malaysia, our 20th round of our record-breaking 22 rounds of campaign, just 2 to go after this Malaysian Grand Prix over in Portimao and in Valencia. All eyes on the skies in some respects as we head into this crucial 60-minute practice session for the MotoGP field. Of course, it will be deciding the automatic top 10 places in tomorrow morning's Q2 session before we go sprinting over 10 laps in the Tissot sprint tomorrow afternoon at 3 PM local time. Vital prep work to be completed ahead of what we hope will be a full dry 20-lap Grand Prix here. There's a bit of a breeze blowing around. Sprawled across a massive area neighbouring the Kuala Lumpur International Airport. Enjoying his best start to a MotoGP weekend. First time we've seen the Brazilian racing rider lead an FP1 session. It was a rain-disrupted session this morning, but when it was dry, out the gate with a 2:00.199 led home. Double world champion Pecco Bagnaia. 2 factory Hondas inside the top 6. Tranmere 3rd, Luca Marini 6th. Marco Bezzecchi, who has topped the Friday action in our last 3 Grand Prix, was 5th fastest behind the impressive Pol Espargaro. Alex Marquez 7th despite his crash at turn 7. Fabio Quartararo, Jack Miller, who was also a fall this morning at turn 15, and Pedro Acosta rounding out your top 10. Work to do for the likes of Morbidelli, Brad Binder, Iagua just outside that top 10 this morning. Fabio Di Gianantonio, fresh off the back of his brilliant second place in Phillip Island 5 days ago. Well, he was 17th fastest on the Pertamina Enduro Ducati. Alex Rins, who's been shining of late on the factory Yamaha as well, was down in 18th spot, 1 place ahead of our Phillip Island winner and our latest MotoGP winner. What is turning out to be a rather unpredictable conclusion to 2025. Ralph Fernandez, of course, in our Australian Grand Prix. The 7th different winner in 2025, 5 different winners in the last 5 Grand Prix. That winning tally of 7 different riders, only 2 shy of our record of 9 in 2016 and in 2020. Pedro Acosta and Luca Marini, a couple of the big names that are still winless in MotoGP. Acosta was 10th this morning, off in the second corner, but it was Fermin Aldeguer that made the front running before the heavens opened. Sepang International Circuit told lashing from some very heavy rain towards the tail end of this FP1 this morning. Matt Byrne, Lewis, will be in the commentary box talking you through all of this crucial practice session this afternoon with Jack Applegard in what at the moment is a dry pit lane. Not sure how much longer we'll be saying that because there are some threatening grey clouds off into the distance. But Aldeguer, for the first time in MotoGP,